Okay, well, thanks very much for the invitation to be here. I'm working now for Oceanwise, an organization in Canada, in Vancouver. And before I start, let me move here a bit so it doesn't slip here. But I'd like to thank Tom, Marcus, and all the team that have done this for years. And it's really, I always feel honored to be invited to be here. So I'm going to give you a Vaquita update, but not only the status of Vaquita, general update where we are, but I'll start with a bit of history probably to remind you of some of the issues. So it might be a kind of a chapters or a quilt talk with lots of patches, and so I hope I make a good job. So first, it's something that I asked myself, and recently I was discussing with friends, why solve a simple problem when a complex one will do? Then we'll come to some of the crime dramas we're going through, some of the international issues, some of the current conservation measures, and I would include there a patch on socioeconomic considerations because I had last night with a friend in a dinner kind of a discussion on this issue. And then, so I put it that last minute really, and then problems with conservation recommendations, what we're doing, our most recent Vaquita moratorium, and some room for optimism. So why solve a simple problem when a complex one will do? In 1961, Norris and Prescott, just shortly after Norris and McFarland described vaquitas as a new species, they reported there was incidental mortality in gillnets for totoaba sharks and rays. And some years later, the first meeting of the Subcommittee of Small Cetaceans of the Scientific Committee of the International Whaling Commission reviewed the status of many species. And when it came to vaquita, they said the coastal distribution of these porpoise where gillnet fisheries operate presents potential management problems. And certainly we all know that is completely true. In the early 1990s, Catarina de Grossa did the first quantitative and robust sound study of incidental mortality. It was published till 2000, but we knew the results by 1995 or so because there was a special issue on porpoise from the International Whaling Commission. And she estimated 39 vaquitas were killed per year. The table to the right shows you the observed mortality, the mortality rate, and the estimated mortality. You can see shrimp, it's very high, even though it has a very small mesh size. There are so many of those nets that it's just a barrier for vaquitas. And then you have also channel, well, those years was intense fishery for channel. And I put Sierra there because many fishers have told us, especially in the last 4 or 3 years, that Sierra has a higher bycatch of vaquita than those two showed in there. And in that same, those same years, to the same issue where Catarina published the first report, Omar Vidal, who was with WWF and as a pioneer working with vaquita, reported 128 records of incidental mortality in those years. And if we look what, again, in the early 1990s, Norris said that Mexican fisheries loss must somehow be made to work or the species will go extinct before we know it. And then he said just a few paid rangers with good boats and new jobs for fishermen would do the job. Probably he was not referring textually, but I think the message was very clear. It's easy to do something now. And he asked himself, how will this happen? And so it's not 27 years. I changed that I hope this is the correct version I have, but it was 30 years now that he said that. And in 1995, you see the picture to the right, there were 245 artisanal fishing boats. And that's by the time Catarina was there in the early 1990s. To the right, in 2000, probably 2009, Jose Campoy, who was the director of the Biosphere Reserve, he counted 629. And currently, I was asking a friend at the Fisheries Department, say they stopped counting pangas, which is, I don't know why they don't have a panga census, but anyway. So I called fishers, and someone told me that probably 900, and others said that there are about the same number of illegal and legal pangas, and he would guess like 2,000 or 3,000. So we don't know, but certainly there are much more than in 1995, when it would have been easy to solve the thing with 245 fishing boats. And now if we come to the international views, all these organizations in one time or another have expressed their concern about vaquita, and you will see history repeats itself twice. Mark said one, the second as a comedy. Here is as a tragedy. But all these show their deep concern about the status of the vaquita and recommended measures to eliminate instead mortality. That's a very vague recommendation, but it reflects certainly the concerns they had. So in 1925, look at this, and it will sound that you heard this before recently. So the priority is stop the main cause of bycatch by closing the Totoaba fishery. Stop illegal Totoaba trafficking at the US border. And since 1991, eliminate mortality in gillnets. That it's about the same year the International Committee for the Recovery of Vaquita Service has been recommended. And that photo to the left is one of the first photos of Totoaba net in San Felipe in the 40s. Now, in 1995, the annual progress report of Mexico to the International Whaling Commission. This is what the report from the Mexican representative said. The Mexican government had taken measures to reduce bycatch by enforcing the closure of all commercial fisheries in the reserve zone created for this species in the upper Gulf of California. And all Totoaba type nets, which I'm not very clear what that means, were confiscated. Well, none of the two happened. The fisheries were never closed, and Totoaba nets or Totoaba type nets have never been confiscated. So Mexico lied internationally about that, which I always find incredible that that happened. But anyway, and now this progress report from Mexico is contradictory. And in that report, Mexico says that they have a study that shows that the reduced flow of fresh water from the Colorado River, which you could see to the right, that map, is a major cause, or the major cause of vaquita and probably Totoaba population decline. Now, the interesting, Mexico said that, but they never presented a report, and they have never presented it, and many times they argue about that, use that argument. And of course, IWC, the scientific committee, had some of the top scientists in cetaceans in the world have rejected these statements. They said there was no evidence presented to support this environmental hypothesis. And here is a brief video in March 2020 of a very fresh vaquita. It was filmed by fishers that was boycotted if there was any doubt. And the government thought this was a fake video. By the way, we've known for over 70 years, and the time when it was right to and easy to control a fishing effort, that upwelling in the upper Gulf and convention keep a very fertile Gulf, upper Gulf, without considering the effects of the Colorado River. So that was 70 years ago, or more, sorry, by Gilbert and Allen. And there are recent papers that talk exactly about the same. And I'm not going to go into that discussion, but just to show that that argument is still being used when there is no single paper that shows that there is no evidence that the flow has affected vaquita. And as Rick Pruska said, this is just to deflect the attention from the actual cause of decline by catching illegal and legal gillnet fisheries. So with that response, what was, and here's another deja vu. The Sacramento Bee in the 1990s, they said, well, let's go for boycotts. Let's go for public awareness and pressure over the Mexican government to see if this provokes solutions. And now we're living in an embargo right now, and there's a boycott right now. And interesting, they also say diplomatic and political pressure through the North American Free Trade Agreement, the NAFTA. Now we have a new agreement, and we're doing exactly the same to see if Mexico is willing to take effective action to prevent the extinction of vaquita. And so under these circumstances, this is where we are. The first survey we did it was less than 600 vaquitas. Now we are in less, probably than 20, around 10. And you can see in the Mayan graph to the left how quick we have lost the species in the last years, almost 40 to 50% per year. And of course, this has brought the international attention. And I was mentioning NAFTA. Here you have the US, Mexico, Canada, and this is a new agreement. And recently the USTR, the United States Trade Representative, has requested for the first environmental consultation under this agreement. I'll mention something more about that later. And we have also the CITES notifications that Mexico might be sanctioned and they will not be able to export certain products that are listed by CITES. And I will mention shortly also something about that. And then to the right here, you would see that's the embargo announcement for seafood from the Upper Gulf because of vaquita. And many of you probably have not seen this video. This was taken by two fishers, and you can see the vaquita there. And don't blink because the vaquita will come towards the screen, and you can hear the fisherman saying, there's something there. I was told that one of those fishes that is in that boat has denied the existence of vaquita. I won't say that's true, but that was the gossip. But important here is this video. You can see the vaquita is coming here toward us, and you can see the black patch if you look carefully. So anyway, where we are now, probably most of you have heard of Banda, which has done an amazing event, and we have had a cascade of events with this sort of crime drama. And she published this article, says that organized crime is taking over Mexican fisheries. And the beginning of having organized crime taking over Mexican fisheries in the upper domain of shrimp is also has been taken by organized crime, was started with probably with the Totoaba. And in another paper, she mentions that the key part here is that this shrimp bladder that is used to cook a soup is used for financial speculation. And there is a very good paper by a friend of mine, that's the one below, Damian, who was the former consul in Hong Kong, and he studied well what was going on, and he published this paper, and he said Totoaba trafficking is a financial crime. So government actions will only be effective if they combat it as such. And he describes how this works, how the mafias or the Chinese organized crime use the money and use a different way to transfer the funds from Mexico to Canada or to Hong Kong or wherever. And so he says something that I think we've said it before, but he said it so clearly that, and studied well, that using these nature reserves or trade regulations and hatcheries like Mexico wants to export Totoaba meat are and will be insufficient to save vaquita. And good enough, here are two of the last news. I think those are March, May in Hong Kong and in Vietnam of trafficking of Totoaba swim bladders. So at the end, what we have is this lack of governance, and there's a short video that was December 2020, I think, when there was a big riot, and you see to the left, there's a Navy boat that is being burned by, or was set in fire by illegal fishers, and to the right, thankfully nothing happened. What you see there is the marina, and there's where we have all the diesel, marine diesel. And the good news is that some of those who were in these riots have been arrested. And sorry to continue with this, here is the criminality score from Mexico by the Global Organized Crime Index. And you see we're fourth from 193 countries, and second from 35 countries, and first of 8 countries in Central America. And this includes not only human trafficking, but as you see, fauna crimes. And in that place, you can see that trade generates hundreds of millions of dollars annually with 1 pound of Totoaba swim bladder. And you've heard this many times, the cocaine of the sea. And this is more valuable than cocaine. And Mexico's illicit cucumber has done. So it's not only vaquita, it's other ones. But what does this mean? Well, let's compare it to Denmark. Here you see Denmark. Market criminality score is 3.87. And I mean, there are 150 from 193 countries, 37 and second. I mean, it's just no way to compare that. We're the top of the table in organized crime in the world. So with these, let's go to what are the current measures that started in 2020. And let me show these. These is all the protected areas that have been trying to control vaquita. So if you can see my pointer here, you see this is the southern boundary of the Biosphere Reserve. And then this is the buffer zone where vaquitas are, but gillnets are usable. And here's the nuclear zone where gillnets are banned. And the reason is when they make this, we didn't know as much as vaquita. And then you have, this is the gillnet exclusion zone, all this big area that covers all historical sightings of vaquita. And this is a 2005 extended vaquita refuge. And just recently, this is the zero tolerance area. So you can see here, Baja, the mainland Mexico, here is the US. And this is the zero tolerance area. We proposed that in CIRVA. And we propose also this other large area and also to increase the size of the refuge, the 2005 refuge. So Mexico enacted new regulations, and many of you have heard of those, and it was published on the Federal Register on 24th of September. This is a zero tolerance area. How it's described is no fishing and non-entry zone in this 225 square kilometers, a small area. And this has to be said, it's going to be enforced through the year, 24 hours a day, through maritime, air, and satellite patrols and surveillance. The agreement also states that bans the possession, manufacture, sale, transportation of gillnets in around that big area that I showed you, the gillnet exclusion zone. And no fishing at night or landing sites. Report bycatch and lost gear pangas must be should have their vessel monitoring system. Net removal, I put that in dark because that's happening. But the next bullet, fishers turn over all gillnets within 60 calendar days of the date of the publication of this agreement. And there are other actions that were supposed to happen between 30, 60, 90 days. And none of them have actually happened or are happening as they were supposed to be. And let me show you, because in July, this was also published. This is the trigger factors. And see if I can explain this because it's complicated. So to the left, you see the number of boats in the zero tolerance area. So if you have greater than 0 and up to 20 boats, the default action by the government is going to be monitoring, continuous surveillance, deterrence. At least 60% of the available human and material resources will be destined to the upper Gulf, which I don't know what exactly these material resources means. But if you have more than 20 and up to 50 boats, then you have the same default action, but with 80% of the available human and material resources. And if you have from 50 to 65, then you have 100% of these resources. But if you have between 60 and 65, then you have a closure area and population of any type. If you have more than 65 in a day, then they will close for a certain time of period of time. For first occurrence, then for second occurrence will be 30 days, third occurrence 30 days, and plus 7 days, and then fourth occurrence like 30 days, and everything is closed for 30 days. Now this sounds complicated. Now imagine there's a similar table, but with length of gillnets. And so in that table, we say greater than so many kilometers of net, and so on, and so on, and so on. But never is clear how they're going to combine the sightings of boats with length of nets. And of course, the response to these trigger factors were lots of letters from NGOs, but I'm going to mention two of organizations that Mexico is part of, the International Whaling Commission and the IUCN, and this letter was signed by the Species Survival Commission. Both letters agree that the regulations created a sliding scale of enforcement efforts levels to be triggered by increasing counts of unauthorized vessels and lengths of gillnets, what I was trying to explain. And these are when they are removed from the sea on a daily basis. And both letters say this is a complex management program and will be almost impossible to implement and enforce. And moreover, undermines what it states in the Mexican law, that this is a zero tolerance area. It doesn't say it's a 65 tolerance area, it's zero tolerance area. And it's not only that, even government officers don't understand what they wrote. I mean, not all of them, but at least some. Here is an example. And this is the New York Times that interviews your Admiral Orozco Tocavin, which is a very good officer. But when they ask him about this, he says, well, we are adapting rule to the social needs on the ground. So effectively, we are allowing the presence of up to 65 boats. So there's no clear for the Navy that it's 0 boats. And he says, we're trying to avoid confrontation. And another government officer, when asked, he said, it's not a zero tolerance area, it's a fishing control area. And certain amounts of boats may fish, and he believes there are 50, so he doesn't even know how many boats they are allowed there. And said, we have to, well, then the Navy comes and tells you to go away. And of course, the result of this is this graph was the maximum count of illegal boats within the zero tolerance area. So you can see those lines in that kind of pinky color are when Sea Shepherd is present. And then there's the maximum number of pangas in blue. And that dotted line is the maximum panga count. And it's a model when you have this kind of irregular data. But anyway, this is by Barb Taylor. What's interesting, you see that there was a big press release and they made a big fuss, the Sea Shepherd together with the Mexican Navy, saying that everything is working perfectly, that there was a substantial reduction in the number of fishing vessels in the CDA. But what is interesting, that the time they were making all these fuss, a few days later, we had the maximum count of illegal fishing boats in the area on the 19th of January, and they did in the 10th of January, they did all this kind of press release and media circles. And they do a good job, but that's not the way you do a good job, by saying things that are not true. And I think what is important is just to consider that looks like few days, but people just remember fishermen don't go out to fish every day. I mean, they have to go when there are good currents, so they can have, good tide, so the gill nets can work. And if it's very windy, they don't go out, etc. So probably because of that, even if the people are saying that things are going perfectly well, the Navy came with this idea. And I participated in a workshop in FAO, and there's a guide there of all the measures you have to reduce or mitigate bycatch. This is not in there. And so what they decided is to place 133 concrete blocks, and they wanted to put them first with nothing. And we told them, the Navy, if you put those things, they're going to sink. That's very soft sea bottom. I mean, you're going to lose that. And so discussing with them, they decided to put these hooks and have these anti-net devices. And how it would work is you have a fisherman trolling their nets. That means it looks more than a Navy boat than a panga. But anyway, these are the floats of the net. Here's the net. And here would be the hooks that will catch these nets. And you will not see because it doesn't look very well. But this, they did some trails, and there is the hooks here. And then there is a net that is stuck in there. And to give you an idea of the scale, here is a fisherman sent me this photo of these devices with these huge hooks. Now, let me come back to CITES here with all these measures. So CITES had a second mission to Mexico in May 30, June 6 this year. And they did one to the Upper Gulf this time, which they did in the first mission. And basically the report, and I have to thank DJ that sent me these bullets. And the positive part was an extensive commitment of resources and personnel. That's the report from CITES. that it has progress made in investigating role of criminal syndicates and cartels. However, since 2018, only 8 individuals convicted of illegal take, possession, or trade of total. And there are certainly much more people, but have a crime doesn't pay sometimes or many times. Now, the negative of the report is that the government has not prevented vessel use and fishing in the zero tolerance area. The report from CITES says there is no expecting of vessels and they're not stopping illegal fishing. And I think one good thing these time CITES did is they interview fishermen, and fishermen told them illegal fishing is a daily occurrence. And we all have been there. We know that. And Tom has been many times in our boats and he has seen that himself. And fishermen are operating illegally and are doing it in plain sight without any consequences. That's absolutely true. And the number of illegal fishers is increasing year after year. So basically, the conclusion is not faithfully implementing gillnet ban in the gillnet exclusion area, no evidence of complying with manufacturing, possession, sale, or transport of gillnets, and no taking sufficient actions to deter illegal fishing in this huge area that I showed you. So it seems that Science Secretary in the US independently, they are going to propose revision to strengthen the decision text directed to Mexico to recommend that it expands its efforts to combat illegal take and trade into Tuaba to address the significant difference documented during the Secretariat mission. I hope this will help. And many of you have seen this one. You haven't seen it. That is Chris Johnson did a fantastic in 2008, and that's a time when Tom has probably still the best photos we have seen with Paula and Chris, and probably still one of the 2 top Vaquita videos so far. And let me come back to this, and you all know that the recovery team for decades, we were saying that if you want to prevent Vaquita from going extinct, you have reduced bycatch to 0, and to do that, you have to eliminate gillnets, and to eliminate gillnets, you have to develop alternative fishing gear and vessel modifications. And last night, a friend told me we never had any socioeconomic considerations or giving any alternatives. And I said, yes, we did. We have. And what we all say, enforce the law of those things that are in red that have not happened, and the ones with the in green are the best we've done so far. But let me make just a parenthesis here on this issue. So there were some papers that asserted that the stakeholders were not engaged, nor was their welfare taken into consideration in addressing Vaquita conservation actions. And that papers were written by good friends and colleagues, Octavio and Andres, and they make good points in some issues. There's another one by Vasquez de Leon, which I don't think it's worth even mentioning. But anyway, those were published not far from each other. And I have to say that those papers didn't take into consideration. We had the multi-stakeholder evaluation and monitoring committee, the OES. And they had a very strong presence of fishermen. Probably the majority in those meetings were fishers. And they made 23 times from 2008 to 2013. That's 5 times a year. That's quite a lot of meetings. And then there was a presidential commission that met 6 times in 1 year. That's 2 meetings per month. That's also a good. So, and in those meetings, they were not only fishermen, there were the leaders of the national federations of fishermen cooperatives. So they were there. And sorry, this is in Spanish, but this is the agreement that was signed in 2013 between the federal government and the fishers. And they say, well, there's going to be a gillnet exclusion zone. And the text there says that the fisheries organizations, that is the cooperatives, agreed to stop fishing with long lines and gillnets for all the species. And in exchange, they will be compensated. Now, you can criticize how this was done, but they were taking into account. It's a lie that was not the case. And here's another paper in a very well-known Mexican magazine, and they say the government paid 338 million pesos. And how that was paid, that was a mistake, because some received tons of money. So there were groups that received 12 millions, and there were some fishers that were realized that they didn't receive anything. So we had to hire those fishers to help us with ours so they could have a salary. And the International Committee for the Recovery of Vaquita recommended not to compensate unless there were specific things fishermen to do, like test alternative fishing gear or harpoon enforcement and so on. So anyway, these are just a few of the 20 socioeconomic recommendations made by the recovery team. And one of them is, of course, I'm just going to stop on this one. We made tons of recommendations about developing alternative fishing gear. And we got tired of asking the government. So at the end, we recommended to create an international expert panel, really worldwide experts in alternative in fishing gear. And this group would have an alternative fishing gear assessment program that would be transparent and would be implemented at a large scale. And thankfully, WWF got that recommendation. Then they tried to do their best job. Sadly, the National Fisheries Institute in Pesca, they were not engaged. And that's not said by me. That's also in a report from the United Nations World Heritage Site saying that they didn't engage. And the committee of experts was the ACOF, the Expert Committee of Fisheries, of Experts in Fisheries Technologies. They have met many times, and we helped in 2018 to bring alternative gear to be tested at the fume tank of the Memorial University of Newfoundland. This is a small trawler. They made recommendations to change the size and other small changes. And these are the suriperas. They're wind-driven. And what is important here is that the equipment is already available on the shelf. That's what it costs. And they require additional field testing and then can be effective with just polishing and further testing. So there is that, but has been not implemented. Not only that, fishermen want to test the gear they design. And you can see here, here's the rope of the net. You cannot see the gill net, but they had these windows between those yellow arrows, and there are the fishermen. There are photos at the Memorial University of Newfoundland, and we tested the gear. They tested the gear, which just helped to have it brought to Canada and helped to pay for the fishers to go there. And the conclusion at the end of the COP is: don't implement this. This will not save vaquita. It's not a safe net. And not only that, Sarah Mesnick was the mastermind, but we had a meeting, and what you see here is the main shrimp buyers from the US, the government officers, there's the minister at that time, and the fishermen, which are scattered. And from that meeting, there was a letter from the major US buyers to the government of Masing supporting the conservation of vaquita and saying there's an urgent need for enforcement permits because that has been an issue. Trying to test alternative gear takes a long time, or it doesn't work because they don't the government or the fisheries authorities don't give the permits, and they offered to help with alternative gear. So, sorry I made this huge parenthesis, but I just want to make sure that this is clear. Now, why recommendations have been hard to implement? There are many reasons. I'll just mention a few. Come back to this criminality score because I will relate that to what I said previously. So we have the lack of governance and its civil twinge, which is corruption. And in that report, they say that in Mexico, legal fishing could be up to 60% of the national production. That's huge, if that's really the case. But also that governance in Mexico, according to the World Bank, has gone from bad to worse, from 0 to minus 0.12. And that's what the graph to the right is supposed to tell us. And international, we know that when you have low governance, you have more illegal fishing. 60. Sorry? Am I over time? Hello?
You're okay. We have you until 11:30, so you still have time, Lorenzo.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, I heard a bell or something. So anyway, and we know that species are disappearing more quickly in countries with the worst governance scores, and there are many examples there. And also we know from several publications that corruption undermines conservation when it pays better, and then that's a classical case here. Fishers can make from 500 to 10,000 per kilogram of swim bladder, depending on the quality. And we know that a fisher made 160,000 in one fishing day. I mean, and that money, he didn't keep all the money. That had to go in bribes and everything else. And you see to the right some of the 12 illegal fishermen that now they just go out and fish. And it's very difficult to implement bycatch mitigation measures. It's not impossible, but it's difficult. When you allow, and you didn't take your conservation actions in time, you didn't do your homework, And then you have decades of lacking proper fisheries governance. And this is the sum of all our arrangements to manage fisheries. And these are the technical, the scientific, the legal, and et cetera. So those have been lacking for decades. And then the compensation scheme, and I mentioned that briefly before, when some fishermen got 12 million pesos, so they didn't get. They turned to be perverse incentives. And they turned to be perverse incentives because it was badly planned, but also because of corruption. And eliminating gillnet seems like an easy thing, but involves major changes, involves cultural, social changes, involves the will to implement alternative fishing gear properly. And this is hard in communities that are rife to corruption and well-organized crime. I mean, I don't think it's impossible. I mean, it would have been easier in the early 1990s to get all these. So to finish, I'm just going to go through these, what we have done in 2019 and 20 to monitor vaquita. And I'll just say that we have been, as many of you know, doing acoustic monitoring, but that has been complicated because illegal fishermen have been stealing our seapods and also our ropes and anchors. And a fisherman said they have seen those in illegal nets, which really hurts. But anyway, so we cannot collect data as in the past. So when I say stolen, I mean dozens and dozens and dozens of I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars in seapods. Now we could do visual line transits, but we cannot do that because it's so expensive. I mean, we could do it even with a few sightings, but that would probably come to over $3 million US. That would, if you're going to use that money to say how many vaquitas are, that's not worth. So I don't think we're going to have any population size estimates soon. And probably at this point in time, the most important information is that there are still vaquitas there. And we don't need a precise estimate of how few are there, although we are always asking how many are there. I mean, if it's possible, but I think it's very important to know that they are there and to track the lives of these few individuals if that is possible. We also try photo ID. Tom and Paula and others, we did this, and there's a paper published led by Tom, and so we know we can do that, but there's always the winds. The winds are the main enemy to work with vaquita. It's really hard to work with them, and just a few waves, a buffer of more than 2 just gets very complicated, and then it's difficult to maneuver and do what we want to do when you have presence of illegal boats. In 2021, we didn't cover the full area because there were a lot of people fishing in one extreme of the zero tolerance area. So to prevent any conflicts. And then it's difficult to cover survey areas and good quality photos when you have all this presence of illegal boats and you have winds, and we haven't been able to get really recaptures of previously photo ID except once, and that came to a very nice paper from Barb. But anyway, and it's also hard for observers to match sightings. So you see one animal at 6 a.m. and then probably you see another one at 7:30 or 8. Is it the same animal? Is it not the same animal? So we designed this 2019 and especially the 2021 visual efforts, which is not really a survey. And these were funded by private funds from Sea Shepherd, Museo de la Ballena, and Ciencias Marinas and other private donors. And we tried to use and not to lose at the same time some of our acoustic equipment, which are mandolins very wisely this program. And we wanted to solve these 3 questions. How many different vaquitas or individuals were sighted during the 2019 and 2021 survey, including adults and possible calves? 2, how many vaquita calves, individuals, were sighted these years? And are there any signs that vaquitas are unhealthy? And the panels to the right show you the zero tolerance area and the tracks of the boats at that time. And so in 2018, we had 7 sightings with 3 days with multiple sightings. We only had 2 photo IDs, and again, matched to that 2018 effort. And some of the sightings, at least 2, lasted for more than 45 minutes. And that really helpful to track the animals and follow and try to at least see what type of animal individuals they are. But in 2021, we only had 8 sightings during only 48 hours that we had low winds. No sighting lasted more than 26 minutes. And we saw vaquitas to the northwest of the zero tolerance area, a bit outside the zero tolerance area. So because of these complications, we decided to do this expert elicitation, which is really asking experts for their judgments, and how it's described by Cormack and Thomas, which are led these exercises wisely, is that you these judgments, I said, in a careful and structured process. And this is a viable way to provide short-term filling of knowledge gaps. But at the end, what you want to do is to replace these elicitation results with real data in the future. However, in our case, we have to synthesize the opinion of experts, which are our vaquita observers, and Tom and others probably around have participated in these surveys, because there's uncertainty due to the insufficient data or the lack of data. So instead of going forwards, we're going backwards. We're using it the other way around. And we're replacing data we don't have with this expert elicitation. But anyways, it's a good exercise. And again, Cormack and Lynn did just a fantastic job. And here you see this, to the left is the results of the 2019 survey. And the final elicited distribution indicates that 3 was the most likely integer number for calves. So this is only for calves that were cited, with an equal belief that the true value was between 1 and 3, or between 3 and 5. So there was a 97%, and that's when you construct a distribution curve on all these opinions. And so we had 97% chance of 2 or more calves and 71% chance of 3 or more. That's basically what that graph is saying. And in 2021, the median we elicited in this exercise, the distribution number of calves was 1.5, so about the same probability for 1 or 2 calves. And here is the next, this is the total number of vaquitas, and the most likely value was 11, and that distribution indicated that 85% believe that the true number of vaquitas cited was between between 9 and 11. And in 2021, the likely values were 7 and 8, with a final distribution indicated about 78% belief that the true number of vaquitas cited were between 6 and 10. So in summary, this exercise suggested that the number of calves in the zero tolerance area in May decreased a little between 2019 and 2021, and to the most likely number of vaquitas cited in 2018 within the zero tolerance area is about 11 individuals, including probably 3 calves, and the most likely numbers in 2021 is 7 or 8 individuals with 1 or 2 calves. Now, this last one I have to make very clear. This is not an estimate of abundance. It's just the minimum number of vaquitas that are there. So they might be more. But I still think we have room for optimism. And there are these 2 papers, the one in Science and the other one in molecular ecology, one led by Phil Moraine, and both agreed that vaquita is not done because genetic makeup. The lack of diversity is homogeneously distributed through the genome, and this is a sign that there is no inbreeding depression there. And the other paper, led wisely by Jacqueline and Chris, concludes the same: is not due to extinction. Even with a few animals, 10, the population might recover. But if you let that reduce, the chance of recovering just diminishes badly. So basically, the measure is that they have time to purge those little alleles, and what the makeup they have allows them to survive in this area. And we just recently published what I mentioned, but what is important here is that probably we have more vaquitas there because there are 2 options. We had a bias in our previous estimates, but also what we've seen, and I think that's the case, that, as Barb said, the vaquita surviving is not a random sample of all the vaquitas that were there. These vaquitas probably have learned or managed to avoid gill netting, getting entangled. And in 2017, when we tried to catch vaquitas to bring them to sea pens, we saw one of the animals being able to avoid getting in gill net. And we've seen animals with scars that show that they probably had previous experience gill netting. So those animals are very valuable because those are the animals that could recover the whole population. And also the USTR announced, the United States Trade Representative for Environmental Conservation with Mexico that I mentioned previously. To me, this is a brilliant opportunity to do something. I mean, to change really the tide and have the support of Canada and the US that have expertise probably that we don't have one. We don't have a lot of them. And if there's political will, then I think this is a good moment to do. So I see this as a positive thing, and I don't see this as a negative thing that is being seen by many colleagues and friends. I think this is for good because the process implies trying to agree. It doesn't come to a punishment. It really starts with trying to agree best actions for the conservation of vaquita. This is probably the last video of a live vaquita we have from Museo de la Ballena. That was the 2018, and I don't have the edited version, so sorry, but you will see there comes the animals, and there's another moment, another shot, and there are several more. I will not show all of them, but if you pay attention, you will see again the black patches around the eye of one of the animals. There you see it. Okay, well, thanks very much for your attention, and I hope I did well with time.